Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. This is a Spawn Daily episode. Once again, joined by my pal Blake Whitlow. We're here to talk today about Spawn number 57. You can tell by the cover there on my left. Yeah, we're finally getting some Spawn Cy-Gor action. It's been been a long time coming. Like Blake was saying last issue, I think he first showed up like around issue 40. So we're talking almost a year and a half before we finally get a confrontation. And we learn a little more. I mean, we've sort of seen Cy-Gor's origin, but we get a little bit more to get a little more context, learn a little bit more about his ties to Spawn. Like all along, we've wondered what is it about Spawn specifically. I guess I should say, what is it about Al Simmons that has drawn Cy-Gor to him? Because we saw when he was traipsing through the countryside, drawn to New York City, that was the name he kept uttering, Simmons, Simmons. Like, why? You know, why is it Al Simmons? And the other thing you wonder about is Al Simmons technically isn't even Al Simmons anymore. He's Spawn. He's not even in the same body as reminds people all the time. So, again, what is it about Al that can draw Cy-Gor to him? So let me go ahead and share my screen, give you a closer look at that awesome cover from Greg Capullo. Wait, you guys, hold on. I think I have that. There we go. All right, there we are. Yeah, so awesome cover, a lot of negative space, Cy-Gor and Spawn battling it out on the cover. So let's go ahead and dive into the issue with the credits. Story by Todd McFarlane, Greg Capullo on pencils, Todd McFarlane on inks, this time joined by Danny Miki, Jason Gorder, and Chance Wolfe, Orzechowski, editor and letters as always, and then Haberlin and Dan Kemp on colors. Big recap from last issue. Now, this is what's interesting. Like when Blake and I talked about last issue, didn't have a whole lot to say in terms of momentum of the story and what actually happened. And sometimes those are and I've said this before, sometimes those are the biggest recaps. And then when you have issues that have a ton of action, if it's like Spawn's fighting somebody, you can literally sum that up as Spawn fighting Cy-Gor, for example. It's so interesting. So yeah, I'm going to read the summary just because it does give some extra context, maybe a little more, makes things a little more clear. As opposed to some of the things that were implied last issue. So Major Forsberg, military strategist, kidnapped and imprisoned by Jason Winn, key figure in U.S. foreign intelligence. That may not have been completely clear from last issue. Forsberg had determined insights into the great conqueror Genghis Khan. Obviously, the last issue was called Khan. Relayed some of that knowledge to Winn, and Forsberg denied having knowledge of Winn slaughtering Forsberg family right before his eyes, driven mad by that, as well as the torture that he received while he was imprisoned. Forsberg now thinks that Khan's spirit inhabits Winn, and he suffers guilt for having created this power-mad, geopolitically murderous monster. That's, in his mind, that is what Jason Winn has become. So Fitzgerald directed Spawn to free Forsberg, and again, he must have some value. That's why he's still alive. Meanwhile, the Clown continues to direct Winn in a campaign to take out Spawn, and Cy-Gor lies in wait in Spawn's lair in Rat City. So that brings everybody up to date. And as you can see from the first page there, Spawn has returned to Rat City, and he's got Forsberg with him. And poor guy, like Forsberg's still practically naked as he's sitting there tearing up little pieces of paper, looking very scared, almost terrified, you'd say, waiting for, who's going to attack me next. You can see his eyes bulging. Again, great art, great emotion in the face from Greg Capullo. And Spawn's talking to Terry Fitzgerald going, man, we're not going to get anything out of this guy. He didn't say a word on the whole trip back. He's lying in a pile of crap. Like, this guy's a waste. And Terry's not so quick to dismiss. He's like, well, what do you expect, Al? This guy's, he's been rotting away in solitary confinement for years. He's been tortured. Can't find any record of his family, which means they were probably killed. he's if I wasn't so paranoid that Winn was watching me, I'd find a better place to stash him where he could maybe recover instead of your house of horrors. And Spawn actually takes offense to that, which I find interesting because, I mean, what else would you call it? You got dead bodies, creepy worms, trash laying all around. Like, yeah, you do live in a house of horrors, Al. Like, what
Literally
else?
has a throne of decaying
Yeah,
bodies.
yeah.
I
But
think I think he takes offense to it because he's still insecure about all of it. And we talked about this in a previous episode. He isn't completely settled into his new situation, and he doesn't exactly like that he's in this situation. So when Terry makes these kinds of comments and confronts him on these things, like, hey, you could be doing something different other than living in trash and surrounding yourself with like these bacteria infested decaying corpses. Like, you could do other things. And Spawn's like, no, you don't understand. I have to.
yeah, he's definitely in a tough spot. Yeah, you're right. It's probably partially the shame, but yeah, the insult. We're told the insult cuts deep. Spawn's tempted to break communication then, and Terry's like, "Hey, you still there? You still there?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm here." Like, okay, good. The key is not to traumatize this guy any further. I'm sure the trip was bad enough without being wrapped in your cloak. That would unsettle anybody on the way back. So keep him warm. It's really cold tonight. Spawn's like, don't worry, the cold doesn't penetrate down here. Like, what do you think he needs? And Terry said, just time. He just needs time to recover. So obviously he's valuable, going along with what I was saying. Terry tells Spawn, yeah, obviously he's valuable, or Winn would have had him killed otherwise. So we just need time and to figure out what it is that's going to trigger his memory and calm him down, and we can get some information from him. Uh, and Spawn's like, well, I hope you're right, dude, because this guy was living like an animal when I found him. So all of a sudden Terry's like, okay, gotta go because Wanda's coming home. And remember, he's keeping it a secret that Al's back from Wanda. He thinks that's a way to protect her. Um, and so he hangs up with Al quickly as Wanda comes walking in the front door. So meanwhile, Spawn is sitting there pondering this guy, thinking, I just don't see how he's going to be able to help. He feels bad for the guy if he's lost his family, and maybe Spawn's finally realizing that there are some similarities between him and Forsberg. But yeah, Forsberg definitely seems out of it as he's just sitting there tearing up little pieces of paper when all of a sudden the worms seem to become agitated, and Forsberg actually yells out, no, keep them away. I've done nothing wrong. I've paid for my sins. And the reason the worms are going crazy, the reason that Forsberg is kind of agitated is because Cyborg chooses this moment to reveal himself. He comes crashing into the area and attacks Spawn. And I mean, it's hard to overstate how incredible this page is from Greg Capullo. I mean, it's almost like each individual hair on Cyborg has been drawn, or Cy-Gor rather, has been drawn. You have all the detail in Spawn's face, in his cape, in all the bodies that go flying, all the corpses that go flying that were what made up Spawn's throne before Cy-Gor goes barreling into it and everything sort of goes flying. So just an absolute fantastic, really kinetic, and just a really awesome page. And you can see something else too, because I purposely didn't block it out. The edge of these scrolls where the exposition boxes are, I mean, those are done really well. It's detail like that. Like they could have just put just straight up dialogue boxes, but they add a little atmosphere to the story by putting in those edges where it looks very scroll-like. So I definitely wanted to call that out. So yeah, it's a pretty brutal battle between Cy-Gor and Spawn, where Forsberg is out. Well, I'm going to take this chance to escape. Spawn is aware of that, which I think is really cool. Even as he's focused on fighting Cy-Gor, he's got some of his, I don't know, we'll call them minions, the worms and rats and whatnot that kind of keep Forsberg pinned in where he's supposed to be, which I thought was really cool. And it seems like Cy-Gor has a bit of the upper hand, and he kind of tosses Spawn into an alcove where it's sort of dark as Cy-Gor is sort of gathering himself to launch another attack. And as he jumps at Spawn manages to get out of the way at the last second. And we're reminded that Cy-Gor traveled over 300 miles, intent on reaching this hellspawn. And even though Spawn has changed physically, Al Simmons has changed physically, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning, there's still something about him. Even though he's given up his soul, there's still an aura that's forever bound to Al Simmons' existence. And it's that aura that has emanated this beacon that has drawn Cy-Gor to Al Simmons. So even though he's technically not in the same body, even though he's given up his soul, there's something there that's enabled Cy-Gor to hone in on his intended target. So yeah, they trade a few more blows, and Spawn starts to realize that the level of hate, this pure, it's called pure unadulterated hate that Cy-Gor has for him, is something that Al can actually use as an advantage. And this is interesting because Blake and I both have talked so many times about Al acting impulsively, not thinking things through, giving in to either his hatred of Jason Winn, or because of his love for Wanda, or whatever, just acting on instinct rather than really thinking things through. This proves that Al knows that acting that way is a mistake, that it leaves an opening, because Cy-Gor here is doing the same thing, right? He's got unadulterated hate coursing through every synapse of his being, and that creates an opening for Spawn, right? And so Spawn gathers himself. He gathers all these bats into his cloak. You know, we've seen many times, especially when Tony Daniel was drawing, many times the bat as a symbol, much like the worms, much like the rat, as something that Spawn can control, and like an animal or a beast that can help channel the energies of evil from wherever they're being gathered to the symbiote. So as he steps back and waits for Cy-Gor to come to him, he knows that the hate that Cy-Gor feels is a weakness. So Spawn definitely has a plan. And again, really cool page, really cool layout. We see the spikes, we see the eyes, we see the chains, and then all of it brought together there in a great looking page from Capullo. And we're reminded that this kind of strategy, this thinking, and again, it goes against what Spawn does so many times when he acts on instincts, he acts on compulsion. And that's the mistake that Al Simmons has been making. But we're reminded this is why he was selected to become a Hellspawn in the first place. And the way that McFarlane phrases it, it's because his internal wiring was right. The Lords of Hell knew his kind, they knew his value. He knows how to strategize. He knows how to examine and analyze a situation and take advantage of weaknesses that his opponent might have. And that's exactly what he's doing here. He's using the hate that Cy-Gor feels. Cy-Gor is not thinking strategically, and in these first few moments of the fight, Al's figured out already how he's going to beat him. First, he sets him up. He sets him up by acting like he's more tired and he's more slow than he actually is. He wants Cy-Gor to press his advantage and feel like he has the upper hand. And he's also goading the gorilla to keep attacking, keep pressing the attack, and keep finishing the attack, so that he'll act more like he's in a frenzy without deliberate movements. And once all of that happens, it's going to release more adrenaline, which then will have Cy-Gor thinking even less clearly, and that will give the opportunity for Cy-Gor to attack blindly. And when he does that, we see that Spawn unleashes his plan. The reason he gathered all those bats and all those worms and all those beasts that he can control. You can see it there in the panel from Capullo. He launches all that at Cy-Gor. And all these bats and all these worms and all these rats and all these creatures that Spawn can control, they literally go into every orifice, every hole, every possible place that that Cy-Gor can breathe out of, and they suffocate his prey, and we see him fall to the ground. And I mean, it's not. Don't forget, he's a cybernetic gorilla, so it's not only oxygen and everything else he needs. It's all the technology that this blast of worms and bats and whatnot have also damaged. So he's laying there. He's completely defeated, and Spawn has won the day through intelligent analysis, through that internal wiring we're told about from McFarlane. The whole reason that Al Simmons was chosen in the first place is his ability to fight, and it's not what he's been doing. Like, if this is the way that Al would have fought against Curse and against Malbolgia and against all the other people that he's gone up against that have been coming at him from all these different directions, you would think he'd be in a lot better place instead of just reacting and giving into emotion. So it's an interesting way to look at it in terms of, yeah, he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do, but it's exactly what he hasn't been doing all along. So as Cy-Gor lays there, and this part's a little, not the best. It's a little cliche, a little tropey. But as Cy-Gor lays there, he calls out his own name, Cy-Gor. And that somehow magically, miraculously, maybe a little too coincidentally, gets through to Forsberg. He's like, wait, what did you hear you say? And Spawn's like, wait, you can talk? He's like, Cy-Gor, I know that name. So it's not even like something that he was heavily involved in, but it's enough to sort of trigger a memory. He goes, yeah, I read that file. Wait, what? Like, it's not, again, not like if he headed up the project or something. No, he just read the file. He's like, I didn't even think Winn cared about it. Spawn's like, what are you talking about? Winn cared about what? And so then he goes on to explain that they found out about some military assets overseas that were working on creating the perfect killing machine. And it was this Taiwanese cartel. They'd done this research and development on cyborgs, and Winn decided to take their research and kind of have a shortcut. So he sent Al Simmons to their facility. He's like, yeah, we sent one of our assets there. I think his name was Simmons. And he went and extracted all this information, killed everybody. Obviously, Forsberg doesn't know that Spawn is Al Simmons. He goes, yeah, a few years later, Simmons dies under suspicious circumstances, but it was kind of a sloppy hit, and there was some information that a younger cadet was aware of, and there were rumors going around, and then all of a sudden that younger cadet, Mike Konecny was his name, he disappeared. And
I think it's pronounced Konieczne.
Konieczne?
It's Polish.
That's way too hard to say. I'll just say Mike. So yeah, this guy Mike, he got taken out as well, and the rumor was that he became a half monster, a cybernetic gorilla named Cy-Gor. So this guy, this cyborg gorilla, the brain that's in there, is somebody that Spawn knew, somebody that Al Simmons knew, and
was punished as a direct result of trying to uncover the mystery surrounding Al's death.
So really interesting. And you wonder, again, why has Cy-Gor been drawn to Al Simmons? Well, maybe because it was the last major event in his life. It was why he got killed, because he was trying to uncover who killed Al Simmons. So Forsberg goes on to say, yeah, if this is him, Winn must have gained big financial and political clout, and used it to further this this cybernetic gorilla program or whatever. And Spawn's like, he's really taken aback by this. He's like, oh my God, like, this can't be Mike. I can't believe it. And he's still moving around a little bit, and Cy-Gor is rather, and he's remembering. We get, again, a little bit of insight into his origin, how his brain was transplanted into the cybernetic gorilla body, and how he felt drawn to his objective, track down his creator. So meanwhile, back at Terry's house, Wanda stumbled upon the equipment, and she wants to know what the hell Terry's been up to. And he explains how he's been working with somebody to take down Jason Winn, like they always planned. Wanda's worried. Terry's not giving her the whole story, and she can sense it. But she's worried about their family and the danger that it poses. And Terry's like, well, yeah, that's why we need to take him out, basically. So I almost feel like Terry should just come clean with her, but I also can see his side of it, why he might not want to. So back at the scene of the battle, Cy-Gor is starting to recover a little bit, and he says, "Made me you." So he in his mind, in his addled mind, with whatever experiments were done on him or whatever, he's blaming Spawn or Al Simmons, the aura that he senses that's Al Simmons, that is Spawn. He's blaming him for his very existence, which, yeah, you got to blame Winn, not Spawn, but you can understand the confusion with everything that he's gone through. Mm-hmm. But Al, he's having a tough time. He feels guilty enough with everything that's going on, right? And with Cog recently piling on, that he should feel guilty about Winn going after Terry and Wanda, even, beyond their connection to Spawn. The fact that he stole the weapons has a lot to do with why Terry was framed and Winn was trying to take him out. Now, on top of that, he finds out that this guy, Mike, who was trying to uncover the mystery around Al's death, became this cybernetic gorilla through the machinations of Jason Winn because of that. So again, it's more piled on the emotional bonfire and guilt that is Al Simmons' life. So he goes off to get some space, and that's how the issue ends, with a great picture of him hanging out on a gargoyle, New York in the background, with, we're told, laughter echoing in the background. And that's Malbolgia, of course, who's reveling in this guilt and this existence that Al Simmons continues to have, this tortured existence. And again, I'll go back to this idea of, look at the way that Al acted earlier when he was fighting Cy-Gor, in terms of how analytical and emotionless he was in making these decisions, and how successful it was in allowing him to defeat Cy-Gor. But then as soon as something personal is revealed, as soon as something that impacts him, he goes back to not thinking rationally, and that pleases Malbolgia. Not to say that he doesn't deserve to have some space, and this is not a tough revelation for him to experience, the fact that, hey, this guy's a cybernetic gorilla and your death. But again, I mean, it's not like he actively turned this guy into a cybernetic gorilla, but again, he can't help but feel guilty for it. And just the fact that Malbolgia revels in that is proof enough that what Al needs to do is try as much as he can to divorce emotion and impulse from the decision making. That's the only way he's gonna defeat Malbolgia, in my mind.
I think you're completely right. That's the state. I mean, Malbolgia has told him to his face, like, I want you to suffer. I want you emotionally confused. I want you psychologically damaged, because the more messed up you are in that sense, the better I can control you and the better weapon for hell you'll be. And so we've talked about it before, how Al is a little stunted when it comes to his connection to his own emotions, and he has a hard time expressing emotions as an adult. He's had a lot of stuff going on, and he's, we've seen some of his past, how he may have rode the line of potentially being a sociopath, and how he executed his missions. We saw before how he would murder children and old people and women. Like he's a very dark, morally gray character in that regard. So, that's helped shape him into who he is now, and he's wired just the right way. I love the specific wording that they choose. He's wired just the right way to be a tool for hell. And
it can be a little conflicting in a way, though, right? Because I mean, you want to say, okay, he's he's wired the right way, and you want him to rely on that wiring. You want him to rely on quote unquote, instinct. But yet what we're talking about here is him setting his emotions aside. So it's almost like, which way is it? I look at it as Malbolgia wants to break Al Simmons so that the Al Simmons persona becomes completely subsumed, and he no longer is acting on impulse, but is acting on instinct.
Yeah.
And I think that that wiring, when you talk about it, is instinctual. It's, more of a base level of kind of behavior. And Al Simmons, that's the potential he has to be a great general in Malbolgia's army. But you got to get rid of the Al Simmons emotion and impulsiveness first. So yeah, you got to, it's interesting. You got to make sure you kind of, talk about it in the right way, because I don't necessarily think that Al Simmons acting on instinct is necessarily a bad thing, because I think, in terms of how it's laid out here, his instinct, his wiring is to act out of an unemotional way and analyze the situation and make the best choices. But when he acts out of emotion and impulse based on those emotions, I think that's when he gets in trouble. And that's what Malbolgia wants, because of those types of decisions and that kind of behavior is what eventually is going to lead to Al Simmons becoming the equivalent of what Forsberg was in that cell. He'll just be completely broken and hidden away and kind of crazy. And all that's left will be this like instinctual killing machine with the power of a hellspawn.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I completely agree. He needs to get out of that spot where Malbolgia wants him, where he's emotionally tortured, and, try and, not cut off his emotions necessarily, but don't let his emotions control him.
Right.
He controls his emotions don't control him, sort of a thing. As soon as he can actually get a hold of that aspect of him, then he can actually, as we see in this issue, he can make a plan. He can see and analyze a situation and flip it to his advantage. But then, as you mentioned before, as soon as an emotional aspect gets involved, he kind of cuts himself off and he goes off, and now he's in a really bad spot mentally. Before, when it was just a gorilla, that was one thing, he could handle that situation. Yeah, sure, giant robot gorilla trying to kill me, I can figure that problem out. But then as soon as it's an old friend of his that was trying to avenge his death, and he died in the process of avenging his own death, now there's emotional baggage tied to it, and now he doesn't know what to do or how to handle that situation.
Yeah, and it's the other part that's interesting. Well, first of all, I'll say, in terms of what you were saying about, you got to not act impulsively, because that's what Malbolgia wants you to do. I think in terms of like living your life and making decisions, choosing to do the opposite of what the evil demon wants is probably always the right choice.
Yeah.
And secondly, what we have talked about so many times with Al, when he was, before he died, before he was murdered, in terms of the impression we get of him being this sort of closed off, hyper masculine guy who's not in touch with his emotions. And that's probably what made him so good at his job, because in terms of reaching his objectives and completing operations successfully for the CIA, he was completely divorced of his emotions. He wouldn't have been able to carry out some of the more questionable missions, immoral perhaps missions that he was assigned, if he was thinking emotionally. But now you kill him, leave him dead for 5 years, bring him back, and all of a sudden, in a lot of ways, Spawn is completely, and Al Simmons is completely a creature of emotion. How much of it is because he didn't handle his emotions the right way when he was alive? Now he's not alive, and it's like he's cutting loose because he's lashing out. He's in such a terrible position, Again, going back to the idea of the parallels he has with Forsberg. Forsberg was sort of more overtly tortured, but even in Malbolgia's own words, and you mentioned it, Malbolgia wants Spawn to live this tortured existence. So again, it's another parallel between Forsberg and Spawn. But apparently all it takes is the magic word Cy-Gor to kind of snap Forsberg out of it. I think it's going to take more than just a magic word to help Al snap out of it.
Yeah, I really felt I agreed with you entirely when you said it. That was definitely one of those hamstrung kind of comic book things. You just was it a plot device? Sure. Was it well executed? No.
Yeah, you should have made it. You should have made it that Forsberg was like in charge of the project. Then it would have made more sense if it was, really important part of his existence before he died. Maybe it could have been his last assignment before he.
But this was just a random file that he read.
A random file that
he even remembered the guy's Polish name, which is hard to pronounce.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy, but I will say, to switch talking about the art, I called out the one specific page, which is just fantastic from Greg Capullo, but good. Throughout, there's a lot of detritus, a lot of debris. We got worms, we got rats, we got bats, we got chains. I mean,
this was an action-packed episode. It's, and it really did feel like payoff. Like this wasn't issue that we knew was coming eventually, and we didn't know what the full impact of it was going to be. There was just a robot gorilla in the middle of nowhere, and then it starts trekking across America to try and find Al Simmons. And it was a long time coming. And now here we are, we get this issue, and it's so action-packed. The art's phenomenal. The story's pretty good. The writing's really good. We get to see Al develop a little more intellectually and emotionally. And it's all around a good issue. It was a really solid issue for me. I heard before that initially Todd McFarlane only created Cy-Gor because I guess there's like this trend where comic books in comic creators love to draw gorillas. I don't know how true that is. It's just like a rumor that I saw floating around the internet that he just wanted to draw a cool looking gorilla, and that he like back and forthed it with Greg Capullo, and then they kind of created him together. But I don't know how true that is.
Yeah, I've heard that rumor. It's like you put a monkey in your comic or a gorilla or an ape or something, and its sales always go up. People love monkeys in comics. So, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but fantastic issue. I gotta think, man. Like if this came out, if McFarlane drew this in 1 month, like oh my god. Like, I bet Greg would even tell you now, like, there's no way I could go back. Like, that was the younger Greg, 20 years ago, younger Greg.
Yeah.
Like, probably was getting 2 hours of sleep a night in order to get this issue out, because there's just so much detail in it. Just
so much good work.
Yeah, fantastic. So, all right. Well, any last thoughts, Blake, before we wind this one up?
No, I'm all good.
All right, everybody. We appreciate you joining us as always. Don't forget to give us a follow on social media. Leave some comments if you're checking us out on YouTube. Next episode I'll do a recap on what we're doing and why. I haven't done it in a few episodes, so we'll let you know. But we appreciate you joining us as always as we celebrate 30 years of Spawn and 30 years of Image Comics with Spawn Daily. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Have a good one. Bye.